Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Hagen-Botham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show focuses on sharing good news and powering the good in our community. Now here's your host, City Current CEO, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Hagen-Botham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we always love best-selling authors and keynote speakers coming on the show. That's why we're excited to have with us Carla Johnson, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and innovation architect. How are you doing?
Awesome, Jeremy. I have to say, I think you may be the only person ever who has had the same description said to me, like, you need to come down a notch to be perky. Like, you're my kind of energy.
Hey, well, if we're not having fun, the audience isn't going to have fun. So it's one of those where, and how can you not love this sort of conversation around innovation and sharing, amazing recommendations and tips and all sorts of good stuff. So, let's dive in. When you talk about you being a keynote speaker, innovation architect, your book, Rethink Innovation, we'll talk all about that, but talk about where it starts for you. Give us a little bit of your backstory.
Sure. I started out in the world of architecture, and I'm not an architect, not a trained architect, but I did marketing and business development for them. And so much of how I look at the world is through the lens of a design architect. And especially like, what's a world we want to create? What's a community we want to create? And then how do we reverse engineer that into it? And so I looked at marketing a lot in that way. And that's really what you and I were chatting about the other day, is about, the whole purpose of marketing is to have a purpose behind an organization. And how do we talk about that and make that as relevant and as important as everything that we either sell or the service that we provide? And that brought me to the world of amazing ideas and creativity and imagination, and how we get people to think differently and bigger about what's possible.
A lot of people think innovation has to be a new product and technology, but how do you define innovation?
I define innovation as that ability to consistently come up with new, great, and reliable ideas. And there is a little, description behind each one of those. We think of a new idea. It doesn't always have to be something new that's never ever been done before. So, for example, when McDonald started to really do a great job with the drive-through experience, they took inspiration from a Formula One pit stop. So was what they did new and never ever been done? No, but it was new to that industry. And a great idea is kind of subjective. It's what advertising great David Ogilvy says, kind of, makes you a little jealous that you didn't think of it yourself, makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck and kind of gives you goosebumps, but definitely subjective. But a new idea and a great idea doesn't always make a bottom line difference. And that's where the reliability part comes in. Like, how do we do this on a reliable basis that has that bottom line impact? So those three criteria. And then to me, innovation comes when you're able to consistently produce ideas like that over long periods of time.
So this will start to carry us into the book and the keynote speaking. But when you look at experiences, having a lot of diverse experiences, having a lot of dots that can be connected in different ways that lead to new ideas, curiosity plays a very important role in this. So talk about curiosity and that inquisitive nature that will start carrying us into your keynotes in your book.
Absolutely. And you said it exactly like that idea of connecting the dots. I mean, Steve Jobs is the one who said, it's easy to see how a great idea came about. You just look in reverse and see how all the dots are connected. But, looking at it in hindsight doesn't help us as we're trying to plan forward. And if we think about the whole process of innovative thinking and creativity being about connecting the dots, then moving earlier into the process, we have to connect those dots. And what I found through all my experience and research and working with leaders is that the most innovative thinkers, the most creative thinkers are all highly, highly curious people. They know the most random things about the most random topics. And I swear you could drop them anywhere in the world with any group of people, and they can dive in and have a highly informed conversation, or they're just sponges and they absorb things. So that curiosity to always ask, what if, what next? What could this look like? What if we looked at it this way? It's something that sometimes we think of as a luxury, But I think unless we're willing to push the status quo way that we think about things every single day, we're never going to have that true potential as a creative thinker and a curious person unless we're able to get past that.
So the book, Rethink Innovation, How the World's Most Prolific Innovators Come Up with Great Ideas That Turn into Extraordinary Outcomes. Talk about this book.
I about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Experiences, the Seventh Era of Marketing. So how to create story-driven experiences. That was in 2015. Jump ahead to 2025. We have a lot of brands who are doing that, Peloton, Nike, and becoming an athlete and things like that. But at the time, as I would talk about this process, people would say to me, I love the framework, but what I struggle with is coming up with truly unique and creative ideas. And for me, who never wanted for an idea a day in my life, I thought that's so fascinating. Like why do people struggle with that? And then how do they overcome it? So I spent 5 years going down a rabbit hole of setting the most prolific, successful innovators. They could be solopreneurs. They could be, Fortune 50 companies. It could be US, globally. Lots of different backgrounds and experiences. But what led them to this ability to consistently come up with those ideas, oftentimes at the drop of a hat? I know in my career, I always think about the person I met in the hallway who I said, man, I'm struggling with this thing. And they could roll off 5, 10, 15 ideas just like that. So what makes that kind of a person? How do they think? And is that something that you and I and everybody else listening can learn to do? And the truth is, it is. And that's the process that I developed and put into Rethink Innovation called the Wheel of Innovation. And that teaches people a 5-step process that anybody can do. It's scalable, it's repeatable, it's learnable, and most of all, it does deliver those extraordinary outcomes.
So obviously we want people to book you as a speaker and buy the book, but give us one as a teaser. So dive in a little deeper on one.
I'm actually going to give you a story that illustrates them all, and I'll show you how all of those dots connect. So there's this gentleman named Trewin Restorick, and Trewin grew up in the great outdoors. Like, he loved nature and he loved wildlife. And so when he grew up, one of the things that he wanted to do was to really make an impact in communities about sustainability and helping people become environmentalists. So he started this nonprofit organization called Hubbub. And I always find their mission really interesting because it is to make people environmentalists, whether they realize it or not. And it's the realize it or not, I think is funny. Like, I'm from Denver, I'm from Colorado. We're highly aware of it. And I think I make a choice to ride my bike rather than drive my car. I'm not an accidental environmentalist. So I found that really interesting. And so early in the days of his nonprofit, he got a call from the City of London who said, Trewin, we have an incredibly painful problem that we'd love your help with. And what they found is that the city was spending over £1 million a year cleaning up cigarette butts. Now, £1 million is roughly 750,000 US dollars. So $750,000 every single year fixing the same problem. Now, this is money that could easily have gone to early childhood education programs, job reskilling programs, building parks and outdoor areas for people to make the community a better place. So they said, we need to fix this problem because we need that money for programs that are much more important. And so, Trewin could have done, like the normal things, could have done big billboards to talk about it, could have done campaigns and radio ads and things like that. But in his studying of the problem, he observed a couple of things. He said, normally those kind of campaigns either make people feel like ashamed for what they're doing or obligated to maybe donate money or things that didn't make them feel good. And he said, if we're wanting to change behavior, we have to inspire people in a way that they might not even expect. So he's like racking his brain and he's thinking, what can I do? What can I do that's absolutely different? As you may expect, being a Londoner on a Saturday night, he happened to find himself in a pub watching a European football game. So he's surrounded by all of these fans, and he's simply watching what's going on, and watching the crowd is just as much fun as watching the game. So as he pays his tab and he's going out of the pub, he follows this group of four guys who are, you know how sports fans are, who are good friends for long periods of time. They're giving each other a hard time and talking smack about each other's team. And so as he kind of walks back to his hotel, he follows this group down the street, and he hears them talking, and they're competitive not just about their favorite team, but they're competitive about their favorite players. And it was two players in particular, Lionel Messi, and Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, Ronaldo and Messi, like the icons of the sport. And as he's watching this whole competitive dynamic unfold, he said, like, that's the answer to my problem. Like that right there, Ronaldo and Messi, Messi and Ronaldo, that solved the whole problem with the cigarette butts. Because what he said is that it's all about our human nature to be competitive. So the idea that sparked is to put up these bright yellow boxes around London that had a split in the middle and glass in the front of each side. And at the top, it said, who's the better player? On the right side was Ronaldo. On the left side, it said Messi. And then in big letters, it said, vote with your butt. And so what he was asking people to do is, instead of flicking your cigarette butt in the gutter, hold on to it and use your cigarette butt essentially as a vote, you know, a voting tab. And so now, instead of people, you know, throwing them in the gutter, not only would they hold on to it, but they'd collect some more, because he tapped into that innate competitive nature that we have. And so he was able to inspire people to become these environmentalists, and they didn't even realize it. Now, the beautiful thing is that he also understood great ideas have context. So it doesn't just have to be about sports. He asked questions like, does pineapple belong on pizza? Or which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or maybe the most controversial question that any household has ever faced. And it's not, what values do we use to raise our children with? Which one of our, you know, colleges that we're alumni of do we go? Where do we go on vacation? Whose mother-in-law do we make happy at the holidays? But it's rather, which way does the paper roll off the roll of toilet paper? Is it forward or is it backward? And in just a matter of 6 months, they decreased that cigarette litter by 73%. And so when I put this all into a process, he did the simplest thing, is that he simply observed the world around us. He was curious. What do people just do in their everyday life? And just he observed that, and then he distilled that into patterns of our competitive nature, patterns of being sports fans. He related that into his situation, the problem he was trying to solve, which helped him generate ideas, and then pitch them to the City of London, or, you know, pitch them to sponsors, or whatever it was. And here, this simple idea, merely being curious of the world around him and observing it, drove this extraordinary outcome that shifted so much of their budget into programs that made a bigger difference for the community. Now, it wasn't just an isolated example. They've repeated this same process in 37 other countries around the world with the exact same kind of outcomes.
Yeah, I can easily see that's an awesome example too. And the funny thing is, you were talking about the toilet paper. I was thinking, what's for dinner, or where do you want to go for dinner? Yeah. The most difficult
those kind of things.
Yeah.
And we find it's those simple things that brings out our urge to take action, right? We have opinions.
But it's also too, like, a simple answer. Now, obviously it's not simple because of, just like you said, the process and the innovation to create that, but a simple answer to a complex problem that yields actual results, right? And so I think all of this, you know, dovetails into everything that you bring out in a keynote. But talk about some of those different topics that you covered during your keynotes. Talk about, you know, that in terms of you professionally being able to step on stages around the world, how all that transpires for those that want to book you.
Absolutely. So the one that I just shared, that story example, is from a keynote based on the book called Rethink Innovation. And how is it that we find inspiration in the world around us and relate that into our work to come up with these amazing ideas? Because interestingly, most of us, when we need an idea, we start with a brainstorm session or a strategy session, and we know how those go. We say, oh, everybody into a conference room, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. And there's a lot of bad ideas. And, you know, it could be, we all know the highest ranking person, we're just going to go with their idea. So nobody has a career limiting move or conversation. And it feels like a waste of time, and not always do we get our best work. But I think the important thing to remember is by the time we get to that ideation part, we have to have fueled it. If we want to perform our best in coming up with ideas, it's just like Serena Williams stepping on the tennis court. It's like Michael Phelps stepping up to the blocks. They've done a whole lot to prep to perform their best right there. And then that fifth step is pitching the idea. And oftentimes we think, oh, it's the idea, it's the idea, it's the idea. But a bad pitch will kill a great idea. So the great thing about the wheel of innovation is that by the time you get to pitching it, you've already come up with your pitch because you're just telling a story about it. So I teach people how to come up with great ideas, how to pitch them, and then what that looks like for their organization. And then interestingly, as I had given that keynote for people around the world, one of the things that I heard most often is, I'm so fascinated by this observe step, like paying attention to the world around us. And it made me ask the question, why don't we pay more attention to the world around us? And I think we tend to get so focused on outcomes that we forget about the importance of curiosity. And the reason is that we think curiosity is a bit of a luxury. Like, how do you actually make something out of curiosity? Which is what led to me to the idea of applied curiosity. And let's put a contextual model together for how do we actually become curious? How do we practice that as a verb and a mindset? And then how do we take what we learned from being curious and deliver concrete business outcomes? And then along that vein with looking for inspiration and being curious, here we are in this world of AI. And a lot of people think that AI is kind of that final nail in the coffin of human creativity. But I really think we have a beautiful opportunity to use AI to expand our human curiosity and creativity. So that's the third keynote that I give. It's called The Muse and the Machine, and how we can use AI to really supercharge our human curiosity and creativity and use it as a partner rather than a replacement.
I love it. This is one of those conversations you and I could go on forever. So we'll definitely have to have you come back and we can dive in even deeper on all these topics. But wrap up with contact information. So website, social media, where do we go to learn more and connect in with you?
The best place is my website. It's Carla with a C, carlajohnson.co. There's no M. I live in Colorado, so I say the .cos for the great state of Colorado. And when you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter that comes out every other week. I teach you amazing tips and ways to be more creative, more curious in concrete outcomes. And then if you go to my website, you will see an assessment for what kind of innovative thinker are you. There's 6 archetypes. So I'm always curious what kind of archetype people are. And then I always invite people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I always love to hear what you're up to and what you're learning just as much as people have an opportunity to hear from me.
Well, Carla, thank you for all you do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
It was a delight to be here. Thank you, Jeremy.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the City Current Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.